So now let's get to the interesting part. So we have some UI, we have some data logic, and now we have to combine those two. We have to make the UI represent the data, and we also have to make the data react to events that come from the UI. So that's kind of a two-way data binding structure. So on the one hand, the data informs the UI, and on the other hand, the UI informs changes to the data. So typically that's done with events. But let's see what we can do. I think we will put the event logic and the communication between those two. We will put in the app logic. So let's just focus for now on rendering a to-do. So we are going to start with writing our first util function, which should be create element. So it will take in a tag name and attributes. This is just to make our life a bit easier. So let's element is document.create element. No, tag name. And then for every attribute, we'll use object.keys here. So we want the keys of the attributes because attributes is an object. So that's simple for loop. That value is attributes actually let's not do for loop and do just for var key and attributes. So it's even simpler. Var value is attributes key element.set attributes key and value. So this is a very simple way to create our tags a bit more efficiently. So this will be great. Now, what else do we need to do? I think for now we can just start with that. So what we'll do first is we'll write a render function. It takes in the to-dos. So what else do we need? Now we have to think a little bit. We need a reference to our list of to-dos. And we know that our element to list is document.querySelector. And then the square brackets can be used to select attributes. So we know there's one item, one list, or it lists an attribute id to-dos, and this will contain our to-dos. I like to use this instead of IDs and classes because well, it makes more sense to me to use that, especially classes can change. So this will never be used for anything else, so it will not be confusing. It will not have a dual purpose use, which makes it harder to replace. So I like to select on attributes for that reason. So we have our to-dos list. In our render function, now there's a couple of things. First, we can loop over our to-dos list. Let's start with that. Now there's a couple of things here. Let's first return that. We want to first check if the to-do is already present in the UI. If not, create the UI for that to-do item. That's what we want to do. Now, there will be a second loop. This is add new to-dos, and we have a second loop to remove old to-dos. And this is important because it's possible that in the UI there are items that are not in the to-do list anymore. So looping over the to-do list will not help us in this case. So what we will do instead is loop over the child nodes of our to-do list. And we will check if the to-do, if there is a corresponding to-do in the data. If not, remove the UI item. So there we go. That's sort of the logic, what we need to do. So we have a function to create UI elements. We have our basic logic setup. So let's go. What we will start with is this part. I'll just rename this to element just to make it clear that this and this is not the same thing. So we will check somewhere. We will need we need to map our UI element to our data elements, and that's why we use the ID. The ID will be unique. So if we can store the ID in our UI element and we can store it in the data, then we can match those two. So that's important. We'll also do that using one of those data attributes. So what we will do is we will let UI item is our to-do list dot child nodes dot find, and we want a element that has a data set No, I'll just do it like this. Attributes et to do ID. So this should be the same as our todo.id.string. Actually, let's just do it like that. So if our UI item is not there, then we know that we have to create it. So let's just have a create to do item and pass in the to do. Now, I didn't explain this before, but the underscores are from just to help me explain the scope of this this code. Like, this is internal code. Like, nothing. My logic is not does not need to know how I create to-do items. It's not really interested in that. So I will create that function here. Function create to-do item. And we have our to-do. So first we'll create the wrapper. Let to-do wrapper. Well, let's just call it to-do item is create elements. It will be an LE. And now this is how we can apply attributes to it very easily. So we can say class is to-do item, and our et to-do ID is our to-do.id. Now we just can append this append child to-do item. So we create our to-do item and then we append it. Now we want more things, of course. Inside of this we want a couple of things. The first thing we want is the to-do checkbox. Create an element, an input element. We will give it a type. That's very important. And for now, that's actually enough for me. And a to-do description. And we will create an element just a simple div. The to description will have a text element, text node I should say, and the text node will contain the to-do.message. There you go. Now, one thing we can do is also say that the to-do checkbox, its checked value is equal to to-do.status. So we'll check the checkbox if the to-do is done. For now, we're just assuming that this status is just true or false. So we created all our elements. The next part is we take our to-do item and we append checkbox, and we append our description. There you go. We'll just return the to-do item. There you go. So this should take care of adding new to-do items when needed